Right now, the sequester is coming. The sequester is coming. We're confronted by yet another artificial deadline, but the question is, will Congress, and I'll give you a hint, they won't act before it's too late. We'll tell you the next deadline not too far around the corner. And next, as the first pope in 6 centuries prepares to step down, his final days are cloaked in controversy. We're going to talk about the role that the next pope is stepping into. And later, how do you think Seth MacFarlane did last night? Again, a little tip, I don't think so good here, but do you think that this guy was finally breaking the mold here, or do you think he was just downright crass? We'll get into all that and so much more in a packed 60 minutes. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us this Monday evening, February 25th. Now, hope you all had a good week, Ben. Maybe you watched the Oscars last night. I don't know if many of you stayed up that late to see actually who won the big awards, but maybe you're a better man than I. Now, if you weren't too bogged down in trying to negotiate a solution to the impending sequester mess, and if you weren't, guess what? You've got something in common with just about every lawmaker in D.C. The weekend passed without any movement, not a scintilla of movement, or for that matter, any talks on the latest D.C. budget crisis. And now, we're that much closer to either a disaster or pretty much not too serious developments happening whatsoever. It depends on who you ask. No such debate in the White House. They're warning of dire consequences if, in fact, that sequester goes down as expected at the end of the week. And at the bottom of the screen, what we will do is relay local impacts that the administration says will take hold come this Friday if nothing is done. So the question is, what is being done? And for that, let's bring in a senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman.
Well, Rich, with the weekend now behind us, we find ourselves just 4 days from the sequester and all of those spending cuts now taking effect. With that in mind, the president took the airwaves this morning, again encouraging lawmakers to try to get a deal done.
These impacts will not all be felt on day one, but rest assured the uncertainty is already having an effect. Companies are preparing layoff notices. Families are preparing to cut back on expenses. And the longer these cuts are in place, the bigger the impact will become.
As we get closer and closer to Friday, though, there's a new date now being mentioned as a possible sequester solution and budget nightmare sort of all combined together. That would be March 27th, down the bottom of the calendar there, the day the current federal budget, or rather the piecemeal federal budget, expires. Now, without a new deal, the government or portions of it will shut down on the 27th. And there's growing talk that Congress may punt on the sequester and push its pain back to the 27th. The upside, that would give lawmakers more time to work something out. The downside, it would make the penalty for no deal on the 27th that much worse.
Unless the Republicans are willing to compromise and do a balanced approach, I think it will kick in.
It will kick in. You're not going to see $85 billion all of a sudden shrink from the federal government.
And I think that what we are doing now to the men and women who are serving is unconscionable, because they deserve a predictable life in the military. And also these federal employees who don't know whether they're going to be laid off or not.
Well, I think, first of all, the crisis is made up. It's been created. I didn't support the sequester because that's a stupid way to cut spending.
So there you go, some of the negotiations, if you can call them that, in the media. As for the formal in-person kind of negotiations on the sequester, there were none scheduled today. Rich?
Thank you very much, Andrew. For more, we're pleased to be joined by Congressman Gregory Meeks, Democrat of New York. Congressman, nice talking to you again.
Good being with you, Rich.
This thing's going to happen Friday, isn't it?
It's looking that way for sure. When you have, discussions or negotiations where one individual says that there's absolutely no way they're going to put any revenue on the table, there's no need to negotiate, if you're talking about revenue, and you see individuals who said that, look, we don't care what the ramifications are, that's a problem. And so it's starting to really look, unfortunately, like it's going to happen.
You talk to Republicans, and they think that the president has portrayed it's going to be Armageddon in America when this thing goes down, and they're betting that the public's not going to see a really big difference in the first month or so. Do you think the White House might have run the risk here that they overplayed their hand?
Well, no, I think that when you look at, listen, even in my office, I've had to tell my staff that I may have to furlough some individuals and or cut salaries. So when you talk about, there's but so much that you can do with the FAA. If you have to furlough or cut salaries or, stop contracts, that means it's going to cause lines. And anybody that you talk to from the travel industry, I looked at various talk shows this morning, people that's not involved in politics at all, but they will say that if, in fact, you have to cut back on TSA agents, or if you have to cut back on individuals who help guide the planes in, that's going to cause a backup. That's just the way it is. When you look at the limitations you have with reference to defense spending, where, across-the-board cuts, it just doesn't make sense, to be quite honest with you. Generally, if you're going to do a cut, you want to be managing cuts. And the reason why we have this in place in the first place is because we thought that, everybody would understand that this did not make sense, and so therefore we would come together, negotiate something, and resolve the issue. I, for one, I'm a Democrat. I know that there's got to be some cutting in spending. Let's cut spending, but we got to also have some revenue. There's got to be both. Just as I knew that I'm going to have to compromise, they knew when the president was talking about it earlier that they would have to compromise, and they refused to live up to their end of the bargain and make a compromise, which has made our system work for all these many years.
Last question, Congressman. We got about a minute here. Is the real number, the real date people looking at the end of March, because that's when the government was shut down? Are we already that far ahead that we got to solve that problem next year? Forget about when we're going to avoid sequestration. Is that what people are talking about in D.C.?
Well, there's one problem after another, and that is a problem. I'm one who favors to get a big deal. When the president in the last Congress tried to do a big deal, it was the speaker who couldn't get it through his conference. What we should do is, not do the little Band-Aid approach where they're taking the Band-Aid off little by little. That hurts. Let's just snatch it off. The way you snatch it off is doing a big deal, where we're doing a lot of cuts, but we also have revenue that's coming in, where all Americans are sharing and participating in some of the pain, but they also, whatever gain, they all will share in that also. And so I signed on with the number of other Democrats who said, let's do a big deal. And I would hope that the other side would want to do the same thing.
We will see. Congressman, I appreciate a few minutes. Good luck this week.
Thank you very much.